Mistress dresses up for a secret date with the millionaire, but his pregnant wife shows up instead. A swirl of expensive perfume and the sharp click of stiletto heels set the stage for a night of secrets and sizzling deception. In a dimly lit suite perched atop the city's skyline, a woman smooths her designer dress, rehearsing her seductive smile in the mirror. She is the mistress determined to claim the heart and fortune of a renowned millionaire. But fate has other plans. When the door finally opens, she finds herself face to face, not with her lover, but with his pregnant wife. Betrayals from the past and unimaginable revelations collide in this explosive tale of love, lies, and a fight for everything that matters. The day began like any other for Evelina Kostova. She woke up in her modest but immaculately kept apartment, the faint smell of lavender still lingering from the candle she had blown out the night before. Although the place was modest, it was hers alone. The small living room held plush throw pillows in shades of pastel pink and cream, carefully matched to the curtains that draped the single window. She took pride in presenting herself well, both her home and her appearance, no matter the circumstance. Today, though, had a buzz to it that was anything but ordinary. An unspoken promise hung in the air, one that seemed to shimmer with every breath she took. Evelina had been planning, plotting, and daydreaming for weeks. Today was supposed to be the turning point, the night that would seal her future with the wealthiest man she had ever known, Gregory Harrington. Gregory was a man of power, a real estate magnate whose name floated among the city's elite. His photograph frequently graced the local newspaper's pages, whether he was attending a fundraiser or announcing the launch of another luxurious high-rise. He had made a splash in the business world, with deals that people would label as impossible to land. The entire city whispered about him, speculating on his net worth, who he was dating, or which exotic destination he had flown to. But what the tabloids didn't know was that Gregory Harrington had a lover hidden away from prying eyes. That mistress was Evelina, a woman who had carved her path into his life with a potent combination of charm, ambition, and genuine adoration. From the moment they first locked eyes at an exclusive charity gala, an electric spark had bounded between them. Gregory, struck by Evelina's calm sophistication, wasted no time in learning more about her. She, in turn, was drawn to his assuredness and the aura of command he carried like a tailored suit. Though he exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance, she felt that behind it lay a man who searched for something real in a world dominated by surface-level relationships. But Gregory came with complications, namely, a wife. Rebecca Harrington was no mere socialite. She was a respected attorney who had built her reputation tirelessly over the years. She was strong-minded and fiercely protective of her husband, and the rumor mill claimed they had a seemingly unbreakable bond. Both Gregory and Rebecca held the city in rapt attention wherever they went, appearing in magazines as the perfect power couple with philanthropic hearts. Yet, no marriage is immune to secrets. Gregory's desire for Evelina had led him into a labyrinth of lies, and now Evelina stood at the threshold of that labyrinth, feeling both excitement and trepidation. Evelina had planned a special evening for Gregory, an intimate meeting at a luxury penthouse suite that overlooked the city's glimmering skyline. All day, she had been preparing herself physically, mentally, and emotionally. She had chosen a black dress that clung to her curves like a second skin, accentuating her slender waist and the subtle sway of her hips. A pair of red-soled heels, a gift from Gregory himself, added the finishing touch. She spent hours on her makeup, ensuring that every stroke of eyeliner, every brush of mascara, and every flick of lipstick was immaculate. By the late afternoon, she had already placed chilled champagne in the suite's mini fridge, along with the strawberries Gregory loved and a small dish of his favorite dark chocolates. She had even picked up a fresh bouquet of gardenias, Rebecca's favorite flower, ironically enough, But Gregory had once confided that he found their scent intoxicating. Everything had to be perfect because she wanted this night to be unforgettable, a stepping stone to a life where she no longer had to watch from the shadows. When the last rays of sunlight filtered through the glass windows, Evelina felt a rush of adrenaline. She took in a deep breath, letting her reflection fill her with confidence. Tonight, after all, was the night. Stepping off the private elevator, Evelina let her gaze sweep across the penthouse suite. The walls were lined with tasteful artwork, and the floors sparkled with pristine marble. She made a final pass, straightening a vase of lilies, just a subtle touch to accentuate the grandeur. The golden glow of the lamps made the suite feel warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, steel and glass environment outside. As dusk merged into evening, the city below sparkled in a million points of light. Evelina breathed in the cool, crisp, air-conditioned atmosphere, reminding herself that soon she would be greeting Gregory with a glass of champagne and an intimate smile. How many times had she fantasized about building a permanent life with him? It was more than just the allure of money or power. She was thoroughly enthralled by him. She had grown to love the man, not just the millionaire. Over the months, Gregory had become her confidant, the one who saw her potential and made her believe in a future she once deemed impossible. But Evelina also knew that Gregory's wife existed like an unmovable mountain in the background of her life. Rebecca Harrington was, in many ways, a formidable figure. She had built a thriving law practice and often took on pro bono cases that tugged at the city's heartstrings, like single mothers fighting for custody or underprivileged youths caught in legal tangles. Rebecca was loved by the public for her dedication and rumored to be Gregory's anchor during his entrepreneurial ventures. Some even said she was the brains behind Gregory's unstoppable empire. Evelina didn't know much about the real dynamics of their marriage, but from what she had gleaned, it was more complicated than a simple love story. Tonight, though, none of that mattered. Gregory had vowed to come alone, telling Evelina he had an important announcement. The sweet thought of him possibly leaving Rebecca so they could be together without secrecy burned in her mind like a constant flame. The very idea of it made her heart pound. Evelina glanced at the suite's clock, 7:45 p.m. He was supposed to arrive any minute now. She refilled the champagne flutes carefully, making sure not to spill. She wanted to greet him with the epitome of poise. With one final survey, Evelina confirmed everything was perfect. The music, the mood, lighting, the chilled champagne, the luscious strawberries. If the evening went to plan, she would soon be celebrating the official start of their journey together. But one can never truly predict the twists of fate. At exactly 8:00 p.m., the elevator pinged in the corridor. Evelina's heart jumped. This was it. She imagined Gregory stepping out in his immaculate suit and tie, perhaps wearing that mischievous grin that always made her knees weak. She hurried to the door, anticipating the telltale jingle of keys, but instead, a brief hush stretched into silence. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was sharp and businesslike. Evelina felt a moment of confusion. Gregory never knocked. He had a key. Quickly, she smoothed her dress, steadied her breathing, and opened the door. On the other side stood Rebecca Harrington, resplendent yet visibly pregnant, her fitted designer coat leaving no doubt of the life growing inside her. Evelina's breath seized. She recognized that face from countless magazine covers and society columns. At this close proximity, Rebecca radiated a commanding presence. Shock thundered through Evelina's veins, turning her muscles rigid. She froze like a deer in headlights. Without waiting for an invitation, Rebecca strode in, her posture emanating control. She surveyed the lavish suite for 1 second, eyes darting from the champagne to the half-drawn curtains. from the low table set with strawberries to the flickering candle near the sofa. Finally, her gaze flickered to Evelina with an expression that combined cold anger with a trace of heartbreak. Before Evelina could speak, Rebecca tossed a small silver key onto the marble table. "He gave me this," she said calmly, her voice soft yet filled with quiet steel. "He left it in the car. I found it when I started driving. He said he was working late, but I knew better." Evelina's world spun. For months, she had imagined meeting Rebecca under countless scenarios, most of them far less gracious. But no fantasy she had conjured could match the shock of this real encounter. Why are you here?" She finally managed, her voice cracking. Rebecca exhaled, her eyes flickering to the clock. "Because he's been lying to both of us, and I'm not going to let that continue." In a daze, Evelina motioned for Rebecca to sit, even though fear and guilt roared in her mind. If she had any illusions of a peaceful transition or Gregory effortlessly walking away from his marriage, those illusions were quickly vanishing. She wrestled with her panic, aware that every second stretched taut with unspoken tension. For a moment, she considered demanding that Rebecca leave, but logic held her back. She needed to figure out what this meant for her future, for Gregory, for this unborn child. Unsure of what to do, Evelina closed the door, sealing herself in this unexpected confrontation. The city lights below sparkled, but inside the penthouse, a storm had begun brewing, one that threatened to upend everything she had meticulously planned. Trembling inside, Evelina offered Rebecca a seat on the plush sofa. The heavily pregnant wife sank into it carefully, maintaining her composure in a way that reminded Evelina of a queen seated on her throne. Rebecca's coat slipped open, revealing the outline of her round belly. For a moment, Evelina's eyes lingered on the physical evidence of Gregory's long-term bond with Rebecca, something Evelina had, until now, mostly chosen to ignore. The tension was palpable, suffocating even. Evelina perched on the edge of a nearby chair. She wondered whether to speak first or wait for Rebecca to break the silence. Rebecca gently placed a hand on her belly, almost protectively, and eyed the table with the champagne. Slowly, she picked up one of the glasses and studied it, swirling the champagne as though it might hold answers to her predicament. Then she raised her gaze to Evelina. "I'm sure you know who I am," Rebecca said, her tone clipped but measured. "Rebecca Harrington." Evelina nodded, her throat painfully tight. "I do." Rebecca's lips pressed together, forming a thin line of disapproval. Yet there was a sorrowful curve to them, to betrayal and heartbreak overshadowing her usual confident glow. "How long have you been seeing my husband?" Evelina found it hard to maintain eye contact, but she forced herself to reply with as much dignity as she could muster. "About a year." A flicker of pain crossed Rebecca's face. She drew in a sharp breath before continuing. "A year? And during that time, you must have known he was married." Evelina swallowed. She wasn't proud of herself, but she refused to lie in this moment. "Yes, I knew." Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, as though absorbing a blow. "So, you've prepared all of this?" "The champagne, the dress," she paused, glancing at Evelina's figure. "For him, for tonight." The weight of Rebecca's stare made Evelina's cheeks burn. "Yes," she admitted, her voice a whisper. She wanted to add that Gregory had promised her a future, that he said things would change, but it felt hollow and self-serving in front of his pregnant wife. Rebecca put down the champagne flute. "He's not coming," she said flatly. "Not tonight." In that single statement, any illusions Evelina had harbored about a romantic evening with Gregory collapsed. Confusion, anger, and heartbreak surfaced in her chest. She should have known something was amiss the moment she saw Rebecca's face. The fear of losing Gregory forever suddenly seemed more real than any fantasy about becoming his partner. "Why are you here instead?" Evelina asked, attempting to steady her voice. Rebecca exhaled slowly. Because I want answers. Gregory might be too much of a coward to face me with the truth, but I'm not going to bring a child into this marriage with a blindfold on. I found the key to this suite in the console of our car, where he carelessly tossed it. He said he had a late meeting and needed to take a different car. I knew he was lying. I followed him, but halfway through, he must have realized and took a different route. He never came to you. Instead, he went somewhere else. I had this key, and I decided to see what I'd find. And here you are. Evelina flinched at the mention of Gregory's deception. Had he played them both for fools, ensuring neither would track him to the other? Now, Gregory was off somewhere else entirely, leaving his pregnant wife and his mistress to confront each other in a penthouse suite meant for a secret rendezvous. The two women sat in stilted silence for a moment, each one trying to measure the other. Evelina found herself unsure of how to navigate this precarious exchange. She was torn between defending her actions and wanting to flee in shame. But curiosity gnawed at her. If Gregory wasn't here, then where could he be? Evelina ventured a question, her voice trembling. "Do you think he's with someone else?" Rebecca's expression turned grim, and for a moment Evelina glimpsed raw vulnerability beneath her steely facade. "I have no idea anymore," Rebecca admitted, her tone hollow. "I never believed Gregory would stoop this low. A few months ago, I noticed subtle changes in him. He'd come home later, miss dinners without explanation. I attributed it to stress or new business deals. But the evidence became undeniable. A strange receipt in his jacket pocket, an odd phone call. He hung up on as soon as I entered the room. I confronted him, and he brushed me off, saying I was imagining things because I was pregnant and hormonal. Then I saw your name on his phone, and the puzzle pieces finally started fitting together." Evelina's face blanched. This entire time, she had seen Gregory's distance as a sign he was preparing to leave Rebecca. But evidently, he had been weaving a tapestry of lies, telling Evelina he was working on the divorce while telling Rebecca something else entirely. The sense of betrayal sank deeper into Evelina's heart, mingling with the guilt of her own complicity. Does he love you?" Evelina asked, immediately feeling foolish for posing such a question to a pregnant wife. But she couldn't hold back. She needed to understand the nature of their marriage. A wan smile crossed Rebecca's face. "He used to, or at least he used to act like it. We've had our rough patches, but we've also shared our fairy tale moments. I thought we were building a life together, especially now that I'm pregnant." She placed a palm protectively on her belly. "I thought we were strong. Maybe I was naive." Silence stretched between them again, a pregnant hush loaded with heartbreak and the question of what to do next. The city lights glittered below, oblivious to the emotional chaos in the penthouse. Evelina could almost feel her meticulously constructed world shattering, all her dreams of stepping out of the shadows with Gregory's hand in hers gone in an instant. A wave of dizziness overcame Evelina. She rose to her feet and walked to the glass wall that overlooked the city. Rebecca remained on the sofa, her gaze following Evelina's every move. Evelina couldn't meet Rebecca's eyes right now. She needed a moment of clarity, even if all she found was more confusion. Behind her, Rebecca's voice came quietly. "I'm not here to fight you. I came here for truth. Tell me, Evelina, what has Gregory promised you?" Evelina let out a heavy breath. "He said he'd divorce you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "He said it was only a matter of time, that your marriage had been dying for years, and that the baby was just an accident. He told me it wouldn't change anything between us. He said once the paperwork was sorted, we'd be free to live together." Rebecca listened calmly, though her knuckles tightened around the edge of the couch. "An accident," she repeated bitterly. "I was under the impression we were planning a family. Shows how little I really knew." Evelina turned around to see tears brimming in Rebecca's eyes. This woman, this accomplished lawyer, this philanthropic social figure looked heartbreakingly human right now. And that was the moment Evelina truly grasped the depth of the deception they both faced. It wasn't just about a man cheating, it was about an entire future he had dangled in front of two different women, playing them like chess pieces in a match. Only he was destined to win. A trickle of shame seared through Evelina's core. She had allowed herself to believe in Gregory's illusions without fully questioning the reality. She had blinded herself to the complexities of his marriage, to the fact that he was bringing a child into this world. Now she was face to face with the unsuspecting mother of that child, seeing how her own actions had contributed to this heartbreak. Rebecca composed herself, wiping away a single tear before it could fully roll down her cheek. "I don't want to cause a scene or do anything reckless," she said, her voice regaining some of its earlier strength. "But I also refuse to let him continue lying to me. I suggest we call him, right now, together." Evelina hesitated. The idea of calling Gregory, potentially catching him in another lie, or forcing him to confront them both, was terrifying. But she also recognized the inevitability of it. "Fine," she said finally. Rebecca pulled out her phone, the latest model with a sleek gold case. She tapped Gregory's number and turned on the speaker. The phone rang and rang. They waited, tension coiling in the silence. At last, Gregory's voice came on, deep and smooth, though bearing a tinge of annoyance. "What is it, Rebecca?" he answered. I'm busy right now." Rebecca's gaze locked with Evelina's, and she spoke clearly. "Busy doing what, Gregory?" He paused for a fraction of a second. "I told you I had a late meeting with a client. If this is about dinner, I'll be home when I'm done. Is there something you need?" Rebecca inhaled, her voice hardening. "I'm at the penthouse suite, the one you rented for your so-called business trip last week. Care to explain why your mistress is here waiting for you?" The line went deathly quiet. Evelina felt her heart pounding so loud she was sure Rebecca could hear it. Finally, Gregory spoke, his voice sharper. "Rebecca, what are you talking about? You shouldn't be there." Rebecca snorted in disbelief. "Apparently not. But I am, and I'm looking right at Evelina Kostova, the woman you've been stringing along for over a year." Gregory's tone escalated. "Rebecca, calm down. We can talk about this." But before he could finish, Rebecca ended the call. The abrupt click echoed in the penthouse, as final as a judge's gavel in a courtroom. A cloud of tension lingered in the suite, thick enough to cut with a knife. Rebecca stared at her phone, lips pursed. Evelina's arms crossed over her chest, as if trying to contain the roiling emotions inside her. A part of her wanted to call Gregory herself, to demand an explanation, but a bigger part of her suspected it would be pointless. "Do you think he's rushing here now?" Evelina asked uncertainly. Rebecca set her phone on the table with calm deliberation. "Honestly, I don't know. Knowing Gregory, he might try to salvage this situation by lying yet again. Or he might hide until he can craft some story. Either way, I'm not leaving until he shows his face." The clock ticked ominously. Evelina felt the overwhelming need to unburden her chest, to voice her regrets, her heartbreak, her confusion. Yet she hesitated. How do you share your pain with the woman whose life you have, in part, broken? At length, Evelina found enough courage to speak. "I didn't get into this to hurt you," she murmured. "I believed him when he said your relationship was over, that you'd only stayed together for appearances. I thought he was telling me the truth." Rebecca sighed, leaning back against the plush sofa. "I want to be furious at you," she admitted, "and a part of me is. But I also know Gregory's persuasive power. He's had me wrapped around his finger for years. I can't entirely blame someone else for falling under the same spell." Evelina's eyes welled with tears. The complexity of the situation weighed on her like an anchor, and she felt more regret than she ever had in her life. "I never meant for it to go this far. But after a while, I fell in love with him, really in love. He made me believe he was just a breath away from walking away from everything that tied him to his past. And that past was me, Rebecca said, a note of bitterness in her voice. She wrapped her arms protectively around her belly again. I won't pretend our marriage was flawless. We had issues. Maybe Gregory saw in you something new, an escape from the pressures of our marriage. That doesn't excuse what he did. What we all did. Evelina nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I want you to know, if I had known how devoted you were to him, if I had understood that the baby wasn't an accident, maybe I would have made a different choice. Or maybe I should have confronted you from the beginning. Rebecca offered a tight, wan smile. We can't change the past, only how we deal with the fallout. She turned her gaze toward the window, and now there's a new life caught in the middle of all these deceptions. For a long moment, both women let the stillness of the room envelop them. The penthouse, once prepared for a night of sensual delight, had become a theater for heartbreak and disillusionment. Neither woman knew what the future held, but they both suspected it would be drastically different from what they had envisioned hours earlier. To break the suffocating silence, Evelina moved to the kitchenette. She poured 2 glasses of water and brought one to Rebecca. The pregnant wife hesitated, but eventually accepted the gesture with a nod of thanks. For a moment, they sipped in quiet companionship, each lost in her own swirling thoughts. Rebecca studied the swirling patterns of the marble floor as if they might reveal some hidden secret. Eventually, she spoke again. I'm trying to recall every moment in the past year, every smile Gregory gave me, every time he said he loved me, and figure out if it was real or just part of his script. I keep wondering if I missed some obvious sign. Evelina sank into a chair, a wave of empathy washing over her. I've been doing the same thing, except from the other side, wondering if every promise he made me was a lie, or if there was ever a shred of truth in any of it. Their eyes met, and in the reflection, both saw the same grief, the same sense of betrayal. 2 women, supposedly rivals, but now both victims of a man's tangled web of deceit. Evelina's voice quivered as she found the strength to ask, "Will you leave him?" Rebecca inhaled, her emotions swirling. "I don't know," she admitted. "A part of me wants to throw him out of our home. Another part of me worries about our child. Then there's the logical side of me wondering about the legal battle, the financial ramifications, the paparazzi that would swarm us. And what if Gregory tries to claim custody or partial custody one day? Should I endure this for the sake of my child? Or is that the worst message I could possibly send about love and respect?" Evelina nodded, her heart pounding. I was willing to do anything for him. If I had found out he was lying to me like this, I would have ended it. But he always knew how to reel me back in. I don't have a child to consider, though. I can't even imagine. Rebecca's gaze softened. If it wasn't you, it might have been someone else. Gregory is a charming man. He always has been. When we first started dating, I remember how he'd whisk me away to exclusive dinners and exotic trips. He always had this knack for making me feel special, like the center of his universe. But somewhere along the line, we lost that sparkle. I was working on a big case. He was expanding his empire. We just drifted. Evelina listened, feeling a pang of recognition. Gregory had shown her that same intense attention, as though she was his only priority. He made me feel like I was the key to his happiness, she confessed. He'd say things like, "You're my escape from all the noise of my life. With you, I can just breathe." And I believed him. Rebecca sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "It's the same script, different cast," she said sadly. "I can't believe how gullible I've been. Even as a lawyer, someone trained to spot falsehoods, I let my guard down when it came to my husband." A tear slipped down Evelina's cheek. She wiped it hastily, remembering the countless times she'd waited for Gregory in secret hotel rooms. The many nights she cried into her pillow because he'd cancelled at the last minute. She had given him her entire heart, only to discover she was just another link in his chain of deceit. The sweet silence was broken by the distinctive ding of the elevator door in the corridor outside. Both women froze, their hearts pounded in unison. Had Gregory finally come to face them? A moment later, the door swung open, but it wasn't Gregory standing there. Instead, a tall, well-dressed man with slicked-back hair stepped inside, startled to see two women instead of the single female companion he expected. With a swift glance around the penthouse, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Excuse me," he began, his voice cultured and low. "I'm looking for Evelina Kostova. I have a message for her from Mr. Harrington." Evelina, frowning, stood up. "I'm Evelina. Who are you?" He straightened his expensive suit jacket and replied politely, "My name is Roland York. I'm an associate of Mr. Harrington's. He sent me here to deliver this." He held out a sealed envelope. Alarm bells went off in Evelina's head. Why wouldn't Gregory deliver this message himself? She approached Roland cautiously and accepted the envelope. She tore it open to find a handwritten note. "Evelina, I'm sorry. Things got complicated. I need some time to figure this out. Please don't believe everything Rebecca tells you. She's not as innocent as she seems. I'll be in touch soon. In the meantime, this penthouse is paid for through the weekend. You can stay if you wish." Gregory. Evelina stared at the note, her heart sinking. She handed the note to Rebecca without hesitation. Rebecca read it, her face twisting with anger. "Unbelievable," Rebecca muttered. She turned to Roland, arms crossed over her belly in a protective stance. "Where is he?" Roland glanced at Rebecca with mild surprise, only now noticing her pregnancy. He didn't provide his exact location, Mrs. Harrington. Only asked that I deliver the envelope and confirm that Miss Kostova received it. Evelina felt her legs tremble. It was as if Gregory couldn't face the damage he had wrought. Instead, he was sending an envoy to manage the fallout. She wanted to scream, cry, or throw something. But she held herself in check, more for her own dignity than for Gregory's sake. "Well, you've delivered the message," Rebecca snapped. "Now you can go." Roland looked uncomfortable, but he nodded and retreated out the door. The echo of his footsteps in the corridor was soon swallowed by the hum of the elevator. When they were alone again, Evelina and Rebecca reread the note in silence. Evelina's face burned with a mixture of shame and fury. It was so typical of Gregory dodging confrontation to maintain control from a distance. The message contained manipulative words aimed at both of them, an apology for Evelina and a dig at Rebecca's credibility. Evelina sank onto the sofa, her body trembling. She massaged her temples as if to ward off an oncoming headache. "He says he needs time." "That's exactly what he told me a month ago when I asked him to finalize things with you." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "And his jab at me, implying I'm not innocent. He's just trying to sow discord, trying to make me look like the villain so he can rescue you from the wicked wife." They exchanged a knowing look, both aware of how Gregory's manipulations worked. Evelina pressed her palms against her eyes. "I don't know how I got involved in this. I mean, I know I made my choices, but it feels like I've been living in a bubble of illusions." Rebecca's voice softened. "You're not the only one. In some ways, I'm just as guilty for not seeing the signs earlier, or for choosing to ignore them because it was easier than confronting the reality of a failing marriage." The weight of Gregory's betrayal pressed down on them like a leaden blanket, but strangely, a fragile camaraderie was taking root between them. They had uncovered something that connected them: pain, heartbreak, and a sense of disillusionment, so profound it was changing their identities. In the harsh fluorescent light of Gregory's penthouse suite, mistress and wife were no longer pinned against each other. In a cliché drama, they were two wounded individuals seeking truth and closure. Rebecca pulled her phone from her purse and texted Gregory rapidly. Evelina's eyes flickered to the device. "What did you say?" "I told him I want a face-to-face meeting within 24 hours. Rebecca replied, her tone as cold as steel. "This can't drag on. The press is already nosing around my pregnancy, and if this scandal leaks out, it could destroy everything, my reputation, his business, the entire life we've built." Evelina swallowed, feeling a pang of empathy. For all her fantasies about a glamorous life with Gregory, she'd given little thought to the public chaos that would ensue. She'd never had to manage a high-profile career or a public image. What if he refuses? Rebecca clenched her phone. "I'll make sure he doesn't. If he thinks hiding will help, he's dead wrong. I'm done letting him run from his responsibilities." Evelina nodded in agreement. There was a time she would have done anything to protect Gregory, to shield him from scandal. But not anymore. She had sacrificed her self-respect on the altar of his promises for far too long. As the night deepened, Evelina and Rebecca found themselves in a state of uneasy cohabitation. They shared a few awkward moments. Evelina offered Rebecca a meal, which she politely declined. Rebecca, exhausted, tried to stretch her legs, but the penthouse sofa wasn't the most comfortable for a pregnant woman. Shortly after midnight, Rebecca's phone buzzed. She snatched it up, seeing Gregory's number on the screen. Evelina rushed to her side, silently pleading for some resolution. On speakerphone, Gregory's tense voice filled the silence. "Rebecca, are you still with her?" "Yes," Rebecca replied curtly, "and we're waiting for an explanation." Gregory sighed heavily on the other end. "I can't talk about this right now. Please, just go home. I'll come see you first thing in the morning." Rebecca's lips curled in anger. "You want me to wait for you to show up and feed me more lies? Do you think I'm that naive?" "It's not like that," Gregory insisted. "There are things you both need to know. But it's complicated. Trust me, I'm trying to fix this." Evelina couldn't contain herself any longer. She leaned in. "Gregory, if you ever cared about me, about us, you'll face us." Now, a tense silence ensued. When Gregory finally spoke, his voice dropped to a near whisper. "Fine, give me an hour." He ended the call, leaving Rebecca and Evelina exchanging wary glances. An hour from now, the man who had stolen both their hearts and shattered them was set to arrive. Neither knew what to expect. Would he offer a single, coherent explanation? Would he try to pit them against each other? Or would he spin more elaborate lies? "This ends tonight," Rebecca said, steeling herself. Evelina nodded, her pulse racing. If Gregory thought he could manipulate them further, he was in for a shock. The hour stretched like an eternity. Rebecca sat at the marble bar, occasionally sipping water to stay hydrated, while Evelina paced the floor, too anxious to remain still. At last, close to 1 a.m., the elevator chimed in the hallway. Moments later, Gregory Harrington stepped through the door. He looked disheveled, hair askew, tie loosened, the tension clear in his eyes. This was a far cry from the polished, self-assured millionaire who normally graced magazine covers. For a split second, Evelina felt a flicker of pity. Then she remembered the night she had cried, the tension in her chest, the guilt weighing her soul. Beside her, Rebecca drew herself upright, bracing for battle. Gregory shut the door behind him, letting his gaze dart between the two women. "Rebecca." "Evelina," he said, forcing a weak smile that neither returned. Rebecca's fist clenched. "Save the niceties. We want answers." Gregory swallowed, placing his hands in his pockets, a gesture Evelina recognized as one he used when feeling cornered. "I know I've made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Rebecca interrupted, incredulity heavy in her tone. "We have a life together. We have a child on the way. And you've been sneaking around with Evelina, feeding her lies about divorcing me. We deserve more than a vague apology. Gregory's eyes flicked to Evelina, silently pleading for sympathy. Evelina stepped forward. Gregory, you said we'd have a future. You told me your marriage was over, that you were just staying together for the baby. Now, Rebecca says that's not true, that this pregnancy was planned. He sighed, raking a hand through his hair. It started that way. We talked about having a baby, yes, but then we grew apart and I didn't know how to fix it. I felt suffocated, and then I met you, Evelina. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive again, to be desired. Rebecca slammed her hand against the bar, stopping him mid-sentence. And what about me? Am I just a convenient fixture, someone to warm the bed at home while you chase other women? Gregory's face twisted with pain. No, never. I love you, Rebecca. It's just that everything got out of control. I was juggling my business, your pregnancy, our drifting relationship, and I turned to Evelina as an escape. But I had no idea it would go this far. Evelina felt her chest tighten. You promised me a life together. You said you were leaving Rebecca. Were you lying the whole time? He hesitated. I planned on leaving at first, but every time I thought about actually walking away, I couldn't do it. I realized I still cared for Rebecca. And then the news that she was pregnant, it changed everything. I tried to break things off, but you looked at me with such hope, Evelina. I didn't want to hurt you either. His words were a whirlwind of half-confessions. He had loved them both, or claimed to. He had deceived them both. That much was obvious. Rebecca advanced. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to play the victim here. You used Evelina. And you used me. You're about to become a father, and this is how you handle responsibility. Gregory's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. I know I'm to blame, but at least let me explain. Our marriage, Rebecca, it wasn't perfect, and you know that. I felt like we were turning into business partners rather than husband and wife. With Evelina, I felt passion again. I needed that. But I also realized you and I still have a bond. Especially now that we're about to be parents. Evelina's nails bit into her palms. So, what are you saying? That I was just a fling to revitalize your spark? And now you plan to stay with Rebecca? Gregory's gaze flickered with uncertainty. I don't know. That's the truth. I'm torn. I care for you both. But I can't keep living like this. Rebecca's voice trembled with rage. We'll make that choice for you, Gregory. I refuse to stand by and let you waltz between us. If you want to salvage this marriage, you're going to end things with Evelina and commit. Otherwise, you can pack your bags and go, but you'll still be financially responsible for our child. A tear spilled down Evelina's cheek. And what about me, Gregory? Are you going to stand here and just abandon me after everything we've shared? He turned to her, agony etched on his features. I don't want to abandon you, but what can I do? If I choose you, I lose my child. If I choose Rebecca, I lose you. Rebecca's eyes blazed. There's no middle ground. You can't have your mistress and your wife under the same roof. That's not how marriage works. A heavy silence descended. Gregory looked from Rebecca to Evelina, desperation clouding his eyes. I need time. Rebecca let out a bitter laugh. Time for what? So you can continue hiding from reality. No, Gregory. Either commit to our family or walk away. Decide right now. Evelina's heart hammered. Part of her wanted to plead for more time, to talk to Gregory privately and remind him of the tender moments they'd shared. But a larger part of her knew that was just feeding the lies. Even if he chose her, she would be the woman who had broken a family, overshadowing everything with guilt and scandal. Gregory inhaled sharply. Rebecca, you're my wife. You've stood by me for years. You're carrying my child. I can't walk away from that. He turned to Evelina, eyes brimming with regret. Evelina, I'm sorry. I love you, but I can't abandon my child. I hope you can understand. Evelina felt as though the ground had collapsed beneath her. Her worst fear had materialized. Gregory was choosing Rebecca and the baby over her. The heartbreak coursed through her like a physical blow. She wanted to scream at him, to remind him of the months they'd spent building plans for a future that would never materialize now. But words failed her. She simply stared at Gregory, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. He reached out a hand, as though to offer comfort, but Rebecca blocked him, stepping between them. "You've made your decision," Rebecca said, her voice resolute. "You'll come home with me tonight, and in the morning we'll discuss how we move forward. But as far as I'm concerned, if you ever cheat on me again, I won't just divorce you, I'll ruin you in court." Gregory winced but nodded. Understood. Evelina sank onto the sofa, numb. She felt the devastating weight of betrayal and heartbreak, but also a strange sense of finality. This wasn't how she'd imagined things ending, yet some part of her was almost relieved. The mask had finally fallen. For too long, she had occupied a world of illusions. Now, the truth was laid bare. Rebecca turned to Evelina, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know this hurts, but it's best we end this now." Evelina sniffled, clutching the cushion for support. "You have nothing to apologize for," she managed to say. "I'm the one who—" Rebecca shook her head. "We're both victims. I truly hope you find happiness someday that isn't built on secrets." Trembling, Evelina nodded. She cast one final glance at Gregory, who hovered near the door, guilt racking his features. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. A hush stretched across the penthouse suite, until, finally, Gregory cleared his throat. "Let's go," he said to Rebecca, opening the door. Rebecca moved past him. Just before crossing the threshold, she turned back to Evelina with a look that was part sympathy, part relief, and part sorrow. Then she exited, and the door clicked shut behind them. Evelina was left alone in the opulent suite. The half-finished champagne, the strawberries, the lit candles, everything seemed like a cruel reminder of the illusions that had consumed her life for the past year. She thought of chasing after Gregory, begging him to reconsider, but deep down she knew it was pointless. He had chosen his wife and his child, and even if he changed his mind tomorrow, what kind of foundation would they ever have? With trembling fingers, Evelina wiped her tears. She rose and walked to the window, gazing out at the vast cityscape. It struck her how many lives were unfolding below somewhere down there. Hearts were breaking, deals were being made, people were falling in love. Life went on, regardless of her personal tragedy. In the reflective glass, she caught sight of her own image. The black dress, the smoky eye makeup, the meticulously arranged hair, once symbols of seduction and desire, now felt like a costume for a part she no longer wished to play. She felt hollow, yet strangely wiser. There was no going back to who she was yesterday. That woman no longer existed. The hours that followed blurred for Evelina. She cried until her tears dried, paced the marble floors until her feet ached, and replayed every tender moment and empty promise Gregory had made. By morning's light, she felt a dull ache rather than acute pain. Maybe it was the numbness of acceptance. She knew her next steps wouldn't be easy. She would have to sort out her finances. Gregory had been giving her a monthly allowance. That would undoubtedly cease. She would also need to think about her living situation, her job prospects, how to rebuild her life without the illusions she'd clung to. But she was resolute in one thing. She refused to remain trapped in heartbreak. Shortly after sunrise, she slipped out of the penthouse. She left behind the luxurious suite and its memories, walking out with only her purse in hand. It was time to return to her small apartment, her realm of realness, and begin the process of healing. Across the city, in a grand estate behind wrought iron gates, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table, flipping through legal paperwork. Gregory was slumped in a chair, staring blankly at his coffee cup. Neither had slept. Their marriage was now irreversibly altered. The question wasn't just whether they could mend what had been broken, but whether they should. In the weeks that followed, Gregory attempted to atone for his actions. He cut off all contact with Evelina, shifting his focus to repairing his marriage and preparing for fatherhood. He showered Rebecca with gestures of love, planning a baby shower, attending every doctor's appointment, and publicly supporting her charitable work. But trust, once shattered, isn't easily rebuilt. Rebecca carried deep scars of betrayal. In quiet moments, she doubted whether Gregory truly had changed or was merely playing a new role. Evelina, meanwhile, wrestled with heartbreak and the realization that her dreams of living a fairy tale life with a rich, powerful man had been fueled by illusions. She found herself forced to redefine her ambitions. Day by day, she salvaged her pride, determined to carve out a path untainted by secrets. She took a job at a design firm, channeling her creativity into something real, something she could call her own. It wasn't easy. Memories of Gregory were as persistent as shadows, haunting her. But with each sunrise, she learned to let go bit by bit. Rumors eventually trickled through the city's gossip channels. Some suspected a rift in the Harrington marriage, but no damning evidence ever surfaced. No one, aside from a trusted few, knew the full extent of the secret affair and the penthouse confrontation that ended it all. In time, the city found new scandals to feast upon, new couples to idolize or revile. Yet, for the three lives entangled in this drama, Gregory, Rebecca, and Evelina, the scars remained. Their story served as a reminder that illusions, no matter how dazzling, cannot replace the bedrock of honesty. For Evelina, the lesson was the hardest and most necessary one of her life. True love cannot bloom in the dark soil of deception. And though her heart was bruised, it wasn't beyond hope. She would carry forward, stronger and more cautious, looking for the kind of love that could stand in the light of day, unafraid and unashamed. And there it is, a night of secrets, a promise of seduction, and a shocking twist that shattered hearts in a single, agonizing moment. As Evelina Kostova discovered, chasing love built on broken vows can lead to heartbreak. Rebecca Harrington learned that trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to regain. Gregory, torn by his own making, was forced to choose a path under a microscope of regret. In the aftermath, each must confront the costs of love, deception, and the fragile hope of redemption. Will any of them find peace, or will the ghosts of this scandal haunt them forever? Only time will tell.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals. Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife." I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money. Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. Not until we finalize our restructure, he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. I'll handle everything in the meantime. That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home-wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her keycard didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs, Marcus warned. But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal. It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava, and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability." Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust. A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. Jordan, is this true? Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds. She's not. Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter. Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain. Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Miss Monroe, please step into my office. Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership. Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud. Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. You can't shut me down like this. He snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation. Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan. Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. You'll regret this, he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. And you made a fool of me in front of everyone. Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. You did that to yourself, she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill two birds with one stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce. Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old emails messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz?" He began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers." "Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. Have we sent this to the SEC? Not yet, the advisor responded. We wanted to confront them first. Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby, he announced quietly. Thank you, Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. I believe we might need you. Ava's eyes flitted toward the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. Stand down, sir, the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. Let him go. This is a private matter. Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises. Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't do that. I'm on the board. Not anymore, Hartridge said grimly. I can and I will. You're suspended, pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you. A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. I'm sorry you had to endure this, Ms. Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure. Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country, perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. "They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future.